Red Sand, New Hearts. Act 1. Broken Dreams. Chapter 1. The Failing Marriage. The artificial dawn light filtered through the reinforced polycarbon dome of New Olympia, casting long shadows across the residential sector. Marcus Thompson adjusted the atmospheric readings on his personal tablet as he stepped through the airlock of his HAB unit, the familiar hiss of pressurization barely registering after 3 years on Mars. The red dust that perpetually coated everything had settled on his work boots overnight, a reminder that no matter how advanced their technology, they were still strangers on this ancient world. "Morning, Jess," he called softly as he entered their shared living space, hoping to catch his wife before she left for the xenobotany lab. The compact apartment, with its curved walls and efficient design, had once felt cozy. Now it seemed cramped, every surface a potential battleground. Jessica looked up from her coffee, her auburn hair pulled back in the severe bun she'd favored lately. Her green eyes, once warm when they looked at him, now held the distant coolness of someone who had already left in every way that mattered. "The water recycler's making that noise again," she said without preamble, not bothering with pleasantries. "I left a maintenance request on your tablet." Marcus nodded, swallowing his disappointment. "I'll look at it tonight. Maybe we could grab dinner at the observation deck afterward. They're serving that mushroom risotto you like, and the Earthrise should be spectacular around 8. "I'm working late." Jessica gathered her research materials with practiced efficiency. The specimen cultures from the Mariner Valley expedition need constant monitoring. Some of us can't just fix things and call it a day. The familiar sting of her dismissal settled in his chest. Marcus had hoped that moving to Mars together would bring them closer, give them a shared purpose. Instead, the isolation seemed to magnify every crack in their relationship. "Right, of course." He forced a smile. "Maybe tomorrow, then?" Jessica was already at the door, her hand on the palm scanner. "Maybe." The door sealed behind her with a soft pneumatic whisper, leaving Marcus alone with the hum of life support systems and his growing sense of failure. He'd tried everything he could think of. Surprise dinners using precious Earth-imported ingredients, thoughtful gifts crafted from Martian minerals in the colony's workshop, even supporting her research by volunteering for weekend sample collection runs to the polar ice caps. Nothing seemed to reach her anymore. He finished his synthetic coffee and headed to work, the familiar routine of checking atmospheric processors and water reclamation systems, providing a welcome distraction from his personal problems. The engineering bay was a cathedral of humming machinery, pipes, and conduits that kept their small slice of Earth alive on an alien world. Here, at least, he could fix things. "Thompson!" Chief Engineer Roberts waved him over to the main atmospheric display. "We've got fluctuations in Sector 12's CO2 scrubbers. Need you to run diagnostics." Marcus threw himself into the work, grateful for problems with clear solutions. It wasn't until his colleague, Dave Martinez, mentioned seeing Jessica at the Meridian Bar with Dr. Rodriguez from Geology that the knot in his stomach tightened again. "Probably just talking shop," Dave added quickly, seeing Marcus's expression. "You know how it is. Work follows you everywhere in a place this small." But Marcus had seen the way Rodriguez looked at his wife during colony meetings. The way Jessica's laugh sounded different when the handsome geologist was around. On a colony of 800 souls, secrets were luxury items few could afford. That evening, Marcus returned home to find Jessica already there, which was unusual. She sat at their small dining table, her hands folded in front of her like a boardroom executive preparing for a difficult negotiation. "We need to talk," she said. The words every married person dreaded, especially when spoken in that particular tone. Marcus set down his toolkit and took the seat across from her, the red Martian sunset painting everything in shades of ending. "Marcus, Jessica faltered, then seemed to gather herself. "I can't do this anymore. This marriage, this pretending everything is fine when it's not." "Jess, please. We can work through this. Every couple has rough patches." I'm in love with someone else." The words hit like a micrometeorite breach sudden, devastating, and leaving him gasping in the thin atmosphere of their relationship. "Carlos and I, it just happened. We connect in ways that you and I never have." Carlos Rodriguez. The confirmation of what he'd suspected, but hoped wasn't true. Marcus felt something fundamental shift inside him, like a structural support giving way. "How long?" he managed. 3 months. She had the grace to look ashamed. "I know I should have told you sooner, but I kept thinking it would pass, that it was just the isolation playing tricks on my mind. But it didn't pass, Marcus. It got stronger. 3 months. 3 months of his attempts to reconnect, of small kindnesses and romantic gestures that now felt pathetic in hindsight. 3 months of her allowing him to try while her heart belonged to someone else. "I want a divorce," Jessica continued, her voice steady now that the worst was out. "The colonial court can process it quickly. We can split our earth savings, and I'll move to the geology sector housing. You can keep this place." Marcus stared at his hands, noting absently how the red dust had stained his wedding ring. Everything felt surreal, like he was watching someone else's life implode. "Is there anything I could have done differently?" he asked quietly. Jessica's expression softened slightly. "Marcus, you're a good man. You tried to make me happy, but happiness isn't something someone else can give you. I thought it was when we got married. I thought changing locations would change everything else too. But we're different people who want different things. And Carlos wants the same things you do. He sees me, the real me, not the version of me you fell in love with in graduate school." She stood, smoothing down her lab uniform. "I'll stay at the guest quarters tonight. We can meet with the colonial mediator tomorrow to start the paperwork." After she left, Marcus sat in the gathering darkness of his apartment, listening to the life support system cycle air and water and heat through the walls. On Mars, those systems meant the difference between life and death. But apparently, love required different maintenance protocols, ones he'd never learned. He looked out the viewport at the alien landscape beyond the dome, where the ancient riverbeds and impact craters told stories of a world that had once been alive and was now learning to live again, in small, carefully maintained bubbles of warmth and breath. Maybe there was a lesson in that. Maybe survival meant accepting when something was over and finding the courage to build something new from the ruins. Chapter 2. Starting Over. 2 weeks later, Marcus stood in the doorway of Bachelor Pod 47 in Sector 7, his few personal belongings packed into 2 regulation duffel bags. The divorce had proceeded with the efficient coldness of a colonial administrative process: mediation, asset division, filing of forms, and finally, the dissolution of a partnership that had once meant everything to him. The pod was a marvel of compact engineering. A sleeping alcove with storage underneath, a small workstation, a hygiene unit, and a kitchenette that could barely accommodate 1 person. After sharing a full residential unit with Jessica, the space felt both confining and oddly liberating. His neighbor, an older mining engineer named Petra Nakamura, poked her head out as he was wrestling his larger bag through the narrow doorway. "Welcome to Bachelor Row," she said with a wry smile. "Fair warning, the walls are thin, so if you snore, we'll know about it. Coffee makers communal in the corridor break area, and we take turns cleaning it." "Thanks," Marcus managed. "I'll try to be a good neighbor." "Divorced or never married?" Petra asked with the casual directness of someone who'd seen plenty of people cycle through the temporary housing. "Divorced. 2 weeks ago." "Ah." The shell-shocked look gives it away. "Don't worry, it gets better. Takes about 6 months to stop reaching for someone who isn't there anymore, but the freedom grows on you." After Petra returned to her own pod, Marcus sat on his narrow bed and surveyed his new kingdom. Everything he owned now fit in a space not much larger than a storage closet. The silence was different here, not the expectant quiet of waiting for someone to come home, but the neutral hum of machinery and distant voices that reminded him he was alone but not abandoned. His tablet chimed with a work message. The Sector 15 atmospheric processors needed calibration, a routine maintenance task that would take him to the far edge of the colony's industrial section. Marcus welcomed the assignment. Work had become his sanctuary, the one place where his competence remained unquestioned and his value was measurable. The days began to take on a rhythm. Wake at 0600 to the artificial dawn cycle. Quick shower in the cramped hygiene unit. Coffee from the communal machine while checking overnight system reports. 8 hours of diagnostics, repairs, and preventive maintenance on the systems that kept 800 humans alive in an environment that wanted to kill them. Return to his pod. Heat up a protein pack or synthetic pasta. Read technical manuals or watch entertainment feeds from Earth until sleep came. It wasn't living so much as existing, but it was sustainable. 3 weeks into his bachelor existence, Marcus found himself working late on a water reclamation unit in Sector 11. The component had failed spectacularly, flooding the area with recycled water that smelled faintly of cleaning chemicals and biological processes. He'd managed to contain the leak, and was elbow-deep in the filtration assembly when his tablet chimed with a personal message. It was from Jessica. Marcus, I wanted you to know that Carlos and I are making it official. We're requesting a shared residential unit assignment. I thought you should hear it from me, rather than through colony gossip. I hope you're doing well. Jay. He stared at the message for a long time, water dripping from his hands onto the tablet screen. The rational part of his brain acknowledged that this was the natural progression of events. Jessica had moved on, found happiness with someone else, and was building a new life. The emotional part of his brain felt like he'd been punched in the solar plexus. Marcus finished the repair in mechanical silence, tested the systems twice to ensure they were functioning properly, and filed his maintenance report. It was nearly midnight by the time he walked home through the dimly lit corridors of the colony, past the observation lounges where couples shared drinks and watched the alien stars, past the recreation areas where groups of friends played cards and argued about sports scores from Earth. The bachelor pods were quieter at this hour, most residents either asleep or working night shifts. Marcus let himself into his small sanctuary and sat heavily on his bed. The message was still there on his tablet, glowing accusingly in the dim light. He could delete it, pretend he'd never seen it, never known that Jessica was moving forward while he was stuck in a maintenance routine that kept him functional but not truly alive. But something about the honesty of her message, the way she'd taken responsibility for telling him personally, made him type a reply. Jess, thank you for letting me know. I'm glad you're happy. Take care of yourself. M. He sent it before he could second-guess himself, then set the tablet aside and prepared for bed. Tomorrow, there would be more atmospheric processors to maintain, more water recyclers to repair, more of the endless tasks that kept their small human presence viable on Mars. But tonight, as he lay in his narrow bed listening to the life support systems cycle through their routines, Marcus allowed himself to grieve not just the end of his marriage, but the end of the version of himself that had existed within it. The Marcus who had believed that love meant trying harder, that relationships could be fixed like machinery if you just found the right tools and applied the correct procedures. Outside his small viewport, the Martian night stretched endlessly toward horizons that promised nothing but cold stone and ancient silence. Yet somehow, 800 humans continued to breathe and dream and build lives in this impossible place. Maybe survival meant accepting that some systems couldn't be repaired, only replaced with something new, something that might work better in the harsh environment where you found yourself. Marcus closed his eyes and tried to imagine what that something new might look like. Act 2. Unexpected Encounters. Chapter 3. The Meeting. 6 weeks after the divorce finalization, Marcus had settled into a routine that bordered on the mechanical. Work, eat, sleep, repeat. The colony's social workers had suggested he join one of the recreational groups, the Astronomy Club, the Hydroponic Gardening Collective, even the amateur theater troupe that was preparing a production of Hamlet with Mars-specific adaptations. But Marcus found solace in solitude and the predictable problems of maintaining life support systems. It was during one of his evening walks through the colony's main thoroughfare that everything changed. The Central Plaza served as New Olympia's town square, a circular space beneath the dome's highest point where colonists gathered to socialize, conduct business, and feel less isolated from the rest of humanity. Market stalls sold everything from handcrafted items made from Martian materials to precious Earth imports. The transport hub connected the plaza to the various sectors, with maglev pods arriving and departing every few minutes. Marcus was taking his usual route home from a late shift when he noticed them. 2 figures huddled against the curved wall near the transport hub, partially hidden in the shadow of a maintenance alcove. At first glance, he almost dismissed them as colonists waiting for transport, but something about their posture, the way they seemed to be trying to make themselves invisible, made him look closer. The larger figure was clearly an adult, tall and graceful despite their crouched position. But it was their skin that made Marcus stop walking entirely. In the plaza's artificial lighting, it had an unmistakable blue-silver luminescence, and faint patterns traced along visible portions of their arms and neck like living tattoos. Athani, one of the few alien species that had established peaceful contact with humanity, though Marcus had never seen one in person. The mining operations on Phobos employed several Athani work crews, and there were rumors of a small population in the Titan research stations, but they were rare on Mars. The smaller figure pressed closer to the adult child, Marcus realized, with the same distinctive skin tone, but smaller and more delicate. The child's luminous markings pulsed with what Marcus somehow understood was distress. His engineer's instincts kicked in. When you saw a system in distress, you investigated. When you found people in trouble, you helped. It was as simple and complicated as that. Marcus approached slowly, not wanting to startle them. As he drew closer, he could see that the adult was female, with features that were elegantly humanoid, but distinctly alien, slightly larger eyes, a more angular jaw, and those mesmerizing patterns that shifted subtly in the artificial light. "Excuse me," he said softly, stopping a respectful distance away. "Are you all right? Do you need assistance?" The woman's head snapped up, and Marcus found himself looking into eyes that were a deep violet blue, like Earth's oceans at twilight. For a moment, fear flickered across her features, but then she seemed to assess that he posed no immediate threat. "We are," she began, her voice carrying a musical quality with an accent he couldn't place. "We are waiting for transport, but—" She gestured helplessly at a small pile of belongings beside them, or what had once been belongings. Now it looked like the scattered contents of torn bags. The child, a little girl, Marcus could see now, peered up at him with enormous eyes that held too much sadness for someone so young. She said something in what must have been the Ethani language, a series of melodious tones that somehow conveyed anxiety. "Shala Keth Nara," the woman murmured to the child, then looked back at Marcus. "My daughter asks if you are going to make us move along. We have been asked to leave several locations tonight." Marcus felt something tight and angry form in his chest. "No one's going to make you move. I'm Marcus Thompson, Colony Engineering Staff. What happened to your things?" The woman's shoulders sagged slightly, as if his simple kindness had drained some essential tension that was keeping her upright. "I am Zaraeth Silvan, but most humans call me Zara. This is my daughter, Kira Lynn Kira. We were We had employment on Phobos, in the deuterium extraction facilities, but the operation was shut down suddenly. Corporate restructuring, they said. That's been happening a lot lately, Marcus said, though he wondered why Phobos workers would end up on Mars rather than returning to their homeworld or finding other work in the outer system. We took transport here because I had heard of opportunities in the xenobiology research programs, but when we arrived, Zara's voice tightened. A human man at the transport terminal offered to help carry our belongings to temporary housing. Instead, he led us to an abandoned area and took everything we had. Our identification documents, our credit chips, even Kira's comfort items from home. You were robbed. Marcus's engineer brain immediately began cataloging problems and solutions. Did you report it to colony security? Zara's laugh held no humor. We tried. The security officer listened politely and took our statement, but he made it clear that the word of 2 aliens against a human colonist would not carry much weight, especially since we could not provide detailed descriptions or proof of theft. Marcus winced. He'd like to think New Olympia was better than that, but colonies were still primarily human spaces, and prejudice was another system that seemed resistant to maintenance. We have been trying to find work, any work, to earn enough for proper lodging, but Zara gestured at their appearance. Their clothes were clean but clearly showing wear, and the stress of their situation was evident in the way they held themselves. Without proper identification or references, and being what we are, opportunities are limited. Kira said something else in Athani, and Zara's expression grew pained. She's hungry, she translated. We shared a nutrition bar this morning, but the simple statement hit Marcus harder than he'd expected. This woman and her daughter were sitting in the cold shadow of a transport hub because they had nowhere else to go, no money for food or shelter, and no one willing to help them. His divorce had left him feeling powerless, unable to fix the most important relationship in his life. But this was a problem with a clear solution. How long since you've eaten a real meal? He asked. 3 days, Zara admitted quietly. Marcus made a decision that surprised him with its swiftness and certainty. Come with me. Zara tensed. We cannot afford. I'm not asking you to pay for anything. I'm offering to help. Marcus kept his voice gentle but firm. There's a 24-hour cafeteria in Sector 7. We can get you both fed, and then we can figure out what to do next. Why would you help us? Zara's question held wariness born of recent betrayal. Marcus thought about it for a moment. Why was he helping? Because they needed help and he could provide it. Because seeing a child's distress activated something fundamental in his protective instincts. Because in the past weeks of mechanical existence, this was the first time he'd felt truly useful as a human being, rather than just a maintenance technician. Because it's the right thing to do, he said simply. And because I know what it feels like to lose everything and not know where to go next. Zara studied his face for a long moment, those violet eyes seeming to weigh his sincerity. Finally, she spoke to Kira in Ethany. The child's luminous markings brightened slightly. Hope, Marcus thought, and she nodded. We accept your kindness, Zara said formally, but only as a loan. When we are able, we will repay you. We'll worry about that later, Marcus said, then knelt down to Kira's eye level. Hi, Kira. Are you ready for some real food? The little girl looked to her mother, who nodded encouragingly. Then, in carefully pronounced English, Kira said, Thank you, Marcus. The sound of his name in her young voice, spoken with such careful courtesy, despite her obvious exhaustion, did something to the cold, mechanical rhythm his life had become. It reminded him that kindness was also a form of maintenance, not of systems, but of the connections that made survival worth the effort. Chapter 4. Opening Doors. The Sector 7 cafeteria was nearly empty at this hour, staffed by night-shift workers and frequented by insomniacs, third-shift employees, and the occasional lonely soul seeking the comfort of shared space. Marcus guided Zara and Kira to a corner booth, noting how Kira's eyes went wide at the sight of the food dispensers and hydroponic displays. "It's not gourmet," Marcus said as he programmed the meal dispenser, "but it's nutritious and filling. Any dietary restrictions I should know about?" "Athani digestion is similar to human, but we cannot process capsaicin, what you call spicy foods," Zara explained, settling into the booth with visible relief. "And Kira has not developed full tolerance for some of your artificial preservatives." Marcus selected mild protein bowls with synthetic vegetables and grain supplements, adding extra portions when he saw how carefully Kira was trying not to stare at the food preparation area. He included 2 of the cafeteria's better dessert options, chocolate pudding cups, that were one of the few Earth-authentic items available. When he returned to the table with the loaded tray, Kira's luminous markings were pulsing with what he was beginning to recognize as excitement. She whispered something to her mother in Athani. "She says it smells like the station cafeteria on Phobos, where the human workers were kind to her," Zara translated. Good smells mean safe places to her. As they ate, Kira with the focused intensity of someone who had been genuinely hungry, Zara with more restraint, but evident gratitude, Marcus found himself studying them. The Athani were supposed to be one of the more human-compatible species, but he'd never realized how the similarities and differences would strike him in person. Zara's movements were graceful in a way that seemed almost choreographed, but it was clearly natural rather than affected. Her luminous markings shifted subtly with her emotions, brighter when she smiled at something Kira did, more subdued when her expression grew thoughtful. Kira's patterns were more active, pulsing and flowing like living art across her visible skin. "How old is Kira?" Marcus asked, noting how the child was methodically trying each component of her meal separately, as if cataloging flavors. "By your reckoning, she would be 8 years old. By ours, she is in her first full cycle, still very much a child, but old enough to understand that we are far from home and in difficulty." Zara's voice held the particular sadness of a parent who couldn't shield their child from harsh realities. "Where is home originally?" "Ethos Prime, in what you call the Centauri system. But Kira was born on Titan during my first work assignment with human corporations. She has never seen our home world." Zara paused, seeming to consider how much to share. "Her father died in a mining accident when she was 4. Since then, it has been just the 2 of us." The simple statement carried weight that Marcus recognized. Single parenthood was challenging enough on Earth or Mars. Doing it as a member of a minority species, moving between human-dominated workplaces, must have been incredibly difficult. "I'm sorry for your loss," he said quietly. "Thank you. Jorath was a good partner and a devoted father. Kira still asks for him sometimes." Zara's markings dimmed slightly. "But we survive, and we go forward. It is what he would have wanted." Kira finished her meal and began working on the chocolate pudding with the systematic approach of someone conducting a delicious experiment. She offered a spoonful to her mother, chattering in Athani about the texture and flavor. "She wants to know if all human children get to eat such wonderful desserts," Zara translated with a smile. "Only the lucky ones," Marcus replied, which earned him a solemn nod from Kira. As they finished eating, the practical problems reasserted themselves. It was nearly midnight, and while the cafeteria provided temporary warmth and safety, it wasn't a solution to their larger predicament. "The temporary housing waiting list is usually weeks long," Marcus said, thinking out loud. "And without proper documentation, we will manage," Zara said firmly. "Perhaps we can find work tomorrow that provides lodging, or—" "Where were you planning to sleep tonight?" Marcus interrupted. Zara's silence was answer enough. Marcus looked at Kira, who was carefully scraping the last of the chocolate from her pudding cup, her markings now showing a contentment that made her appear even younger. The thought of this child sleeping rough in the maintenance corridors or unused storage areas made something fierce and protective rise in his chest. "I have a proposition," he said, the words coming out before his rational mind could analyze all the potential complications. "My place isn't much a bachelor pod, barely big enough for one person, but it has a real bed, climate control, and a hygiene unit. You could stay there tonight, both of you. Tomorrow we can figure out something more permanent." Zara's eyes widened. "We cannot impose." "You're not imposing. I'm offering." Marcus kept his voice steady, though internally he was questioning his own sanity. He barely knew these people, and taking in refugees, especially alien refugees, could potentially complicate his own situation in the colony. But looking at Kira's trust and Zara's carefully controlled desperation, he couldn't bring himself to care about the complications. "Why?" Zara asked again, the same question she'd posed in the plaza but with different inflection. This time it sounded less like suspicion and more like wonder. Marcus considered several answers. Because Jessica had made him feel like his efforts to help were unwelcome. And here were people who genuinely needed assistance. Because his engineering training had taught him that stable systems supported their component parts. Because in 6 weeks of mechanical existence, this was the first time he'd felt like he was contributing something meaningful to the universe. "Because you need help, and I can provide it," he said finally. "Because Kira deserves to sleep somewhere safe and warm. And because—" he paused, surprised by his own honesty. "Because I've been feeling pretty useless lately, and this is something useful I can do." Zara studied his face again with that same careful assessment she'd used in the plaza. But this time, when she spoke to Kira in Ethne, the child's response was immediate and enthusiastic. "She says you have kind eyes and that your light marks are gentle," Zara translated. "Ethani children are sensitive to emotional resonance. She trusts you." "What about you?" Marcus asked. Zara was quiet for a long moment, her markings shifting through patterns he couldn't interpret. "I trust my daughter's instincts, and I trust that anyone willing to buy food for strangers and offer shelter without asking for anything in return is someone worth trusting." "Then it's settled." Marcus stood and began clearing their table. "Bachelor Pod 47 isn't much, but it's home." As they walked through the quiet corridors towards Sector 7, Kira between them chattering softly to her mother in their musical language, Marcus realized that his mechanical routine had just been thoroughly disrupted. Tomorrow, he would wake up responsible for 2 additional lives, in a living space designed for one person, with no clear plan for how to resolve their situation. For the first time in weeks, the uncertainty felt like possibility rather than anxiety. "Marcus?" Zara said softly as they reached his door. "Thank you. Whatever happens tomorrow, tonight you have given us something precious, safety and kindness, when we needed it most." As Marcus palmed the lock and ushered them into his small sanctuary, he couldn't help but think that they might be giving him something precious in return. A reminder that his capacity for care hadn't been destroyed by his divorce, just misdirected. And perhaps a chance to discover what kind of person he could be when helping others didn't feel like a burden, but like coming home. Act 3, Building Trust. Chapter 5, Domestic Harmony. Marcus woke to the sound of quiet conversation and the smell of something that definitely wasn't standard colony breakfast rations. For a moment, disorientation clouded his thoughts. His bachelor pod was too small for anyone to be cooking without him knowing about it, and he lived alone. Then memory returned. Zara and Kira, the robbery, his impulsive decision to offer shelter. He'd given them his bed while he took the floor, despite Zara's protests. His back ached from sleeping on the thin emergency mat, but the sounds from his kitchenette suggested his guests were not only safe, but somehow managing to create actual food from his meager supplies. He sat up carefully, not wanting to startle them, and peered around the partition that separated his sleeping alcove from the main living space. Zara stood at his compact food prep station, her movements efficient and graceful as she cooked. Kira sat cross-legged on the floor nearby, sorting through what appeared to be a collection of small objects. "Good morning," Marcus said softly. Zara turned with a smile that transformed her face. In the harsh fluorescent lighting of the cafeteria, she had been beautiful in an alien, untouchable way. Here, in the warm glow of his pod's morning cycle, she looked approachable, real. "I hope you do not mind," she said, gesturing at the food prep area. "I found some items in your storage that were beginning to lose freshness, and I had a few spices of my own. I thought perhaps we could combine them into something more pleasant than either would be alone." Marcus looked at his kitchenette with new eyes. Somehow, Zara had transformed his collection of nearly expired protein packets, wilted hydroponic vegetables, and synthetic grain supplements into something that smelled remarkably like actual breakfast. Steam rose from a pan that held what looked like scrambled eggs, though he was certain he'd had no eggs. "Is that protein recombination?" Zara explained, with what might have been pride. "Your food fabricator is more sophisticated than the ones on Phobos. I was able to restructure the protein compounds into a more familiar texture, and the yellow color comes from hydroponic turmeric that was about to spoil." Kira looked up from her sorting project and waved enthusiastically. "Marcus, Mama made good food." Her English was accented but clear, and her luminous markings pulsed with obvious excitement. Seeing her enthusiasm in the safety of his pod, Marcus realized how subdued she had been the night before. "It smells amazing," he said honestly. "But you didn't have to?" "Yes, we did." Zara's voice was firm, but not unkind. "You have given us shelter and safety. The least we can do is contribute what we can to the household." Household! The word sent an unexpected warmth through Marcus's chest. When was the last time his living space had felt like a household rather than just a place to sleep between work shifts? They ate breakfast together around his small table, and Marcus was surprised to discover that Zara's culinary alchemy had produced something that actually tasted like the eggs and toast he remembered from Earth. Kira chattered about her sorting project, apparently organizing a collection of small stones and metal fragments she'd been carrying in her pockets. "She collects things that remind her of places we've been," Zara explained when Marcus asked about the collection. "That blue stone is from Titan's methane beaches. The copper fragment came from her father's last mining site, this silver piece." She held up a small twisted bit of metal. "This was from our first home together on Phobos, before the company housing was upgraded." Marcus watched Kira carefully arrange her treasures in a small pattern on the table, her young face serious with concentration. Each piece clearly held significance beyond its material value. A portable history of a life lived in transition. "I used to collect things too," he found himself saying. "Interesting rocks from the Martian surface, unusual mineral formations from the excavation sites. Jessica always said—" He stopped, realizing he'd been about to share something painful. "She did not appreciate your collections?" Zara asked gently. "She thought they were clutter, taking up space we didn't have." Marcus shrugged, trying to make it sound casual. "She wasn't wrong. In a colony habitat, every cubic centimeter matters." Zara was quiet for a moment, then reached across to touch one of Kira's stones. "Sometimes the things that matter most are the things that seem least practical. Memory has its own architecture." The observation was so precise, so understanding, that Marcus felt something shift in his chest. Jessica had never understood his need to hold on to physical reminders of meaningful moments. To her, sentiment was inefficiency. After breakfast, Marcus prepared for work while Zara efficiently cleaned the kitchenette. The domestic rhythm felt natural in a way that surprised him, not the careful choreography of people trying not to inconvenience each other, but the easy cooperation of people comfortable in shared space. "I'll inquire about temporary work permits today," Zara said as he gathered his tools. Perhaps something in the hydroponic labs or food service. I have experience with both. What about Kira? She will come with me. It is not ideal, but— Actually, Marcus interrupted, an idea forming. The colony has a children's learning center. It's supposed to be open to all residents, regardless of species. If you're going to be looking for work, it might be easier if Kira had somewhere safe to spend the day. Zara's markings brightened. You think they would accept her? Only one way to find out. I could stop by on my lunch break, see how she's settling in. You would do that? Marcus looked at Kira, who was listening to their conversation with the intense focus of a child trying to understand adult decisions that would affect her life. Of course, the Learning Center was located in Sector 4, a bright space designed to feel as Earth-like as possible. Real sunlight filtered through the dome overhead, and the walls were covered with displays of Earth plants and animals alongside educational materials about Mars geology and colony systems. Marcus had expected some resistance, some bureaucratic complications about admitting an alien child. Instead, the center coordinator, Dr. Sarah Kim, greeted Kira with enthusiasm. "We've never had an Athani student before," she said, kneeling down to Kira's eye level. "What an opportunity for all our children to learn about different cultures." Kira, initially shy, warmed up quickly when Dr. Kim showed her the center's collection of stones and minerals from various worlds. Soon she was showing the human children her own collection, her markings bright with excitement, as she explained where each piece had come from. "She's remarkable," Dr. Kim told Marcus quietly. "Trilingual at her age, and she has an intuitive understanding of geological processes that's quite advanced." "Where did you say her mother was applying for work?" "The hydroponic labs, I think, or food service." Dr. Kim frowned. "With her skills? That's practically criminal underutilization. Has anyone talked to her about the xenobiology research programs? We're always looking for cultural consultants and species liaisons." Marcus felt a spark of hope. Legitimate work would solve so many of Zara's problems: documentation, income, permanent housing. "I don't think anyone's mentioned it to her." "I'll make some calls," Dr. Kim promised. When Marcus returned to his pod that evening, he found it transformed again. Zara had somehow acquired cleaning supplies and had made his small space spotless. More than that, she had reorganized his belongings in ways that made the cramped quarters feel more spacious and welcoming. "I hope you don't mind," she said, noticing his surprise. "I found the supplies in the communal storage area. Petra, your neighbor, said they were available for anyone to use." "You talked to Petra?" "She introduced herself when I was exploring the residential area. She seems very kind. She also mentioned that you have been distant since your divorce. She was pleased to see you bringing friends home." Marcus winced slightly. He hadn't realized his isolation had been so obvious to his neighbors. "She told me something else," Zara continued, her voice carefully neutral. "She said that your former wife was not appreciative of your efforts to care for her, that you would bring her small gifts and plan thoughtful surprises, but she would dismiss them as unnecessary." "Petra talks too much," Marcus muttered, though without real anger. "Perhaps. But she also said that you stopped trying to please people after the divorce, and that was a loss to the community. That you probably have a gift for noticing what others need and providing it quietly without seeking recognition." Marcus busied himself with hanging up his work jacket, uncomfortable with the praise. "I just do what needs doing." "Yes," Zara said simply, "that is the gift." Kira bounced into the main area, her arms full of art supplies from the learning center. "Marcus, look what I made!" She thrust a drawing toward him, a colorful representation of what appeared to be 3 figures standing in front of a domed structure. 2 of the figures had the blue-silver skin and luminous markings of Athani, while the third was clearly human. "That's us," she explained proudly, "in our home, our home." Marcus looked at the drawing, at Kira's proud smile, at Zara's gentle expression as she watched her daughter share her art. Something in his chest loosened, a tension he hadn't realized he'd been carrying. "It's beautiful, Kira. Should we put it on the wall?" "Yes, right there." She pointed to a bare section near the kitchenette. As Marcus helped her attach the drawing to the wall, he caught Zara watching them with an expression he couldn't quite interpret. There was warmth there, and something that might have been longing, but also a careful distance that reminded him she was still very much a guest in his space, grateful but not settled. That night, as he lay on his floor mat listening to the quiet sounds of Zara and Kira sleeping in his bed, Marcus realized that his mechanical routine had been completely abandoned. His pod no longer felt like a temporary refuge from loneliness. It felt like a place where people took care of each other. The change should have been alarming. Instead, it felt like coming back to life. Chapter 6. Healing Hearts. 2 weeks into their stay, Marcus had fallen into a routine that bore no resemblance to his previous bachelor existence. He woke to the smell of real breakfast and the sound of Kira practicing her English vocabulary. He returned from work to find his living space not just clean, but somehow improved, small repairs completed, storage optimized, the atmosphere warmer and more welcoming. More importantly, he found himself looking forward to coming home. "Dr. Kim called today," Zara announced over dinner on a Thursday evening. "The xenobiology department wants to interview me for a cultural liaison position." Marcus felt a surge of genuine excitement. "That's fantastic! When?" "Tomorrow afternoon. It would involve working with research teams who need to understand ethani biology and cultural practices. The pay is better than food service, and it comes with housing assistance for families." Zara's markings brightened, then dimmed slightly. "I am nervous. It has been a long time since I interviewed for professional work." "You'll be perfect for it," Marcus said, with confidence he genuinely felt. "You're articulate, knowledgeable, and patient. Plus, you've already proven you can work effectively with humans." "Have I?" Zara's question held genuine uncertainty. "Look around." Marcus gestured at the transformed pod. "You've taken a space barely suitable for one person and made it work for 3. You've helped Kira adapt to a completely new environment. You've been nothing but thoughtful and considerate, even though you're the one who needed help." Kira looked up from her dinner. "Mama is the best at making homes," she said solemnly. "She made our place on Phobos feel safe, even when the mining sounds were scary. And she made Titan smell less bad with special flowers." Zara smiled at her daughter, but Marcus caught the flicker of pain that crossed her features. "We have moved many times," she said quietly. "I have become efficient at adaptation." "That's not just efficiency," Marcus said. "That's a skill, a valuable one." Later that evening, after Kira had fallen asleep, Marcus and Zara sat together in the small living area, sharing tea that Zara had somehow created from plants she'd identified in the hydroponic gardens. "Marcus," she said quietly, "I need to tell you something." The serious tone made him look up from his technical manual. "What is it?" "If I get this position, Kira and I will be able to move to proper family housing. We will no longer need to impose on your hospitality." Marcus felt something cold settle in his stomach. Of course they would move out. That had always been the plan, temporary help until they got on their feet. He should be pleased that his assistance had been effective. So why did the thought of returning to his solitary routine feel like losing something essential? "That's great," he managed. "You'll have more space, proper privacy. Kira will probably love having her own room." "Yes." Zara's markings shifted to patterns he was beginning to recognize as conflicted emotions. "But I wanted you to know that leaving here will not be easy for us. You have given us more than shelter, Marcus. You have given us family." "Family?" The word hit him harder than he'd expected. "I'll miss you both," he admitted. "More than I probably should." Zara was quiet for a long moment, her tea cooling in her hands. "May I ask you something personal?" Marcus nodded. "Your marriage, what ended it, truly. Petra mentioned infidelity, but I sensed there was more. Marcus considered deflecting, giving the simple explanation he'd given others. Instead, he found himself wanting to be honest with her. Jessica and I wanted different things, but it took us a while to admit it. She needed someone who would challenge her, push her to excel, compete with her intellectually. I thought love meant being supportive, accommodating, trying to make her happy. He paused, organizing his thoughts. I kept trying to fix problems by being more helpful, more attentive. But what felt like care to me felt like suffocation to her. And the other man gave her what I couldn't: excitement, intellectual sparring, passion instead of comfort. Marcus shrugged. In hindsight, we were incompatible from the start. I just didn't want to see it. Zara nodded slowly. On Ethos, we have a saying: the flower and the stone may both be beautiful, but they cannot nourish each other. You were not wrong to offer care and support. You were simply offering them to someone who needed different things. The observation was so gentle, so free of judgment, that Marcus felt something ease in his chest that had been tight since the divorce. "What about you?" he asked. "Your husband? What was he like?" Zara's markings shifted to softer patterns. Jorath was steady, like bedrock. He made me feel safe to be vulnerable, safe to hope for future plans. With him, I was not always the one adapting, accommodating, making new situations work. Her voice grew wistful. He saw me, truly saw me, and loved what he saw without needing me to be different. That sounds like what everyone deserves. Yes, but it is rarer than it should be. Zara met his eyes. I think perhaps you offered that kind of love to your wife, but she was not able to receive it. That is not a failure on your part. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the quiet hum of life support systems, a familiar backdrop. Marcus found himself studying Zara's profile as she gazed out the small viewport at the Martian landscape. Her markings pulsed slowly, rhythmically, like a visible heartbeat. "Zara? Yes? However the interview goes tomorrow, I want you to know that having you and Kira here it's been the best few weeks I've had since coming to Mars. You've reminded me what it feels like to take care of people who actually want to be cared for." Zara turned to look at him fully, her violet eyes searching his face. "And you have reminded me what it feels like to be cared for by someone who asks for nothing in return except the chance to help." The moment stretched between them, filled with something Marcus didn't quite have words for. Not quite romance, too soon for that, too complicated by circumstances, but recognition, perhaps. The acknowledgement that they had found in each other something they hadn't known they were missing. "Whatever happens," Zara said softly, "you will always be family to us. Kira adores you, and She paused, then continued with careful honesty. "I have come to care for you very much." "I care for you too," Marcus replied, surprised by how easy it was to say. "Both of you." The next evening, Marcus paced his pod nervously, checking the time every few minutes. Zara's interview had been scheduled for 2 p.m., and she'd estimated it would take no more than 2 hours. It was now past 5 p.m. When the door finally chimed, he opened it to find Zara and Kira both practically glowing literally. In their case, their markings bright with excitement. "I got the position," Zara announced, her formal composure cracking into a brilliant smile. "Senior Cultural Liaison to the Xenobiology Research Division. Good salary, full benefits, and housing assistance." Marcus swept Kira up in a spontaneous hug, spinning her around as she giggled. "That's wonderful! Congratulations!" "And," Zara continued, "they want me to start Monday, which means we can begin looking at family housing immediately." That's great," Marcus said, setting Kira down and trying to inject enthusiasm into his voice. Zara's markings dimmed slightly. "Marcus, there is something else. Dr. Kim mentioned that the department has been looking for consulting engineers who understand both human and alien technological interfaces, someone who could help adapt colony systems for multi-species use. Marcus looked at her quizzically. That sounds like interesting work. It would be a promotion from your current position. Better pay, more challenging projects, and it would involve working closely with the cultural liaison team. The implication hung in the air between them. Working together, seeing each other daily, professionally and personally. Are you asking me to apply? I am suggesting that perhaps we do not have to say goodbye quite so completely, Zara said carefully. That perhaps this transition could be a beginning rather than an ending. Marcus looked at her, at Kira bouncing excitedly beside her mother, at his pod that would feel impossibly empty once they left. The mechanical routine that had sustained him after his divorce seemed pale and lifeless compared to the warm chaos of shared meals and quiet conversations and the simple pleasure of being needed. I think, he said slowly, I'd like to hear more about this consulting position. Zara's smile returned, and Kira cheered as if she understood that the adults had just decided something important and wonderful. Later that night, as Marcus lay on his floor mat, for what might be one of the last times, he listened to the quiet sounds of his temporary family sleeping and realized that his life had been irreversibly changed. Not by grand gestures or dramatic declarations, but by small kindnesses, shared meals, and the gradual recognition that taking care of others could be as healing as being cared for. Tomorrow would bring new possibilities, new arrangements, new ways of being together. But tonight, in the gentle rhythm of their breathing and the soft glow of Kira's markings in the darkness, Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced since before his marriage began to crumble. Hope, Act 4-4, Love Blooms. Chapter 7. The Confession. 3 months had passed since Zara started her position as senior cultural liaison, and 2 months since Marcus had accepted the consulting engineer role with the xenobiology department. Their professional collaboration had been seamless. Marcus's technical expertise complemented Zara's cultural insights perfectly, and together they had successfully adapted several colony systems for multi-species use. Personally, things had become more complicated. Zara and Kira had moved into a proper family housing unit in Sector 3A, spacious 2-bedroom apartment with real windows and enough room for Kira to display her growing collection of Martian minerals. Marcus had helped them move, then returned to his bachelor pod, which suddenly felt cavernous and sterile after weeks of shared warmth. They still spent time together, of course. Family dinners twice a week, usually at Zara's place since she had a proper kitchen. Weekend excursions to the observation decks or the recreational areas. Marcus had become a fixture in Kira's life, helping with homework, teaching her to play chess, listening to her excited chatter about her school projects. But there was a careful distance now, invisible boundaries that hadn't existed when they were sharing his tiny pod out of necessity. Marcus found himself weighing every word, every gesture, afraid of presuming too much or crossing lines that had never been explicitly drawn. The breaking point came on a Tuesday evening in late autumn, or what passed for autumn in the climate-controlled environment of New Olympia. Marcus was working late in the engineering lab, calibrating atmospheric sensors for the new multi-species residential wing, when Zara appeared in the doorway. "I thought I might find you here," she said softly. Marcus looked up from his diagnostic tablet, surprised. "Zara? Is everything all right? Is Kira?" "Kira is fine. She's having a sleepover with her friend Emma from the Learning Center." Zara stepped into the lab, her markings dim in the low lighting. "I came because I need to tell you something." Marcus set down his tablet, giving her his full attention. There was something in her posture, a careful tension that made him think of important conversations, life-changing announcements. "What is it?" Zara moved closer, close enough that he could see the subtle patterns shifting across her skin, close enough to catch the faint scent of the herbal soap she preferred. Marcus, these past few months, working with you, seeing you with Kira, watching you navigate our strange little family dynamic. She paused, gathering courage. I have fallen in love with you. The words hit him like a sudden pressure drop, disorienting, breathtaking, wonderful and terrifying all at once. Zara, please, let me finish. Her markings brightened slightly, pulsing with nervous energy. I know this complicates things. I know you are still healing from your divorce, still learning to trust your own judgment about relationships. But I also know that you care for us, for Kira and for me, and I cannot pretend any longer that my feelings are merely gratitude or friendship. Marcus stared at her, his engineer's mind trying to process the implications, while his heart raced ahead with possibilities he'd barely dared to acknowledge. He stopped, started again. Zara, I care about you too, more than I probably should, given our situation, but I'm scared. Of what? The question was gentle, but it demanded honesty. Of repeating my mistakes. Of thinking I know what love looks like when I obviously didn't before. Of wanting something so much that I convince myself it's mutual when it's not. Marcus ran a hand through his hair, frustrated with his own inability to articulate the tangle of emotions in his chest. Jessica said I suffocated her with care she didn't want. What if I do the same to you? Zara stepped closer, close enough to touch, though she kept her hands at her sides. Marcus, look at me. He met her violet eyes, seeing patience there, and something fierce and determined. In the months we have known each other, have I ever seemed suffocated by your care? Have I ever pushed you away or made you feel that your attention was unwelcome? No, he admitted. When you notice that Kira is struggling with her homework and offer to help, how do I respond? You're grateful. You smile. When you bring me tea during long work sessions, or remember that I prefer the hydroponic strawberries to the synthetic ones, or take time to explain technical concepts in ways I can understand, how do I respond? Marcus thought about it, remembering dozens of small moments. You thank me. You seem happy. Yes, because those gestures come from seeing me, truly seeing me, and wanting to care for me in ways that matter to me. That is not suffocation, Marcus. That is love. The word hung between them, simple and complex, and full of possibility. Your former wife needed different things, Zara continued. She needed challenge and excitement, and intellectual sparring. I need stability and kindness, and someone who sees caring for others as a strength rather than a weakness. We are not the same person. Marcus felt something tight in his chest begin to loosen. And you really? I love you, Zara said simply. I love your gentleness and your competence and the way you make Kira laugh. I love how you approach problems methodically, patiently, with genuine care for finding solutions that work for everyone involved. I love that you offered shelter to strangers without expecting anything in return, and that you have become family to us so naturally that I cannot imagine our lives without you in them. The confession was thorough, specific, and utterly convincing. Marcus felt tears prick his eyes, relief and joy, and the overwhelming realization that he was loved, truly loved, by someone who understood exactly what she was accepting. I love you too, he said, the words feeling both terrifying and inevitable. I have for weeks, maybe months. I just didn't think. I wasn't sure you could feel the same way. Why? Because you're extraordinary, brilliant and graceful, and capable of adapting to anything life throws at you. And I fix things. I maintain systems. I'm ordinary. Zara's markings flared brighter, and for the first time since entering the lab, she smiled. Marcus Thompson, you are many things, but ordinary is not one of them. You took in 2 homeless aliens without knowing anything about us, except that we needed help. You have learned to read Athani emotional patterns well enough to comfort a grieving child. You approach every challenge with patience and thoroughness and genuine care for the people affected by your decisions. She reached out, finally closing the distance between them to touch his face gently. You are the most extraordinary, ordinary man I have ever known. Marcus leaned into her touch, overwhelmed by the simple pleasure of being seen so clearly, so fondly. What happens now? He asked. Now, Zara said, we figure out how to build something together. Slowly, carefully, with respect for Kira's feelings and your healing and the complexity of our situation. But together. Marcus covered her hand with his own, marveling at the warmth of her skin, the way her markings pulsed gently in response to his touch. I'd like that, he said. Very much. Chapter 8. New Beginnings. The courtship that followed was unlike anything Marcus had experienced. With Jessica, their relationship had been intense from the beginning. Passionate arguments about research methodologies, competitive collaboration on projects, a constant push and pull that had felt exciting until it became exhausting. With Zara, everything was gentler, more deliberate. They moved forward like engineers building a critical system, testing connections, ensuring stability, taking time to address potential points of failure before they became problems. The first challenge was Kira. I need to tell her, Zara said during one of their evening walks through the observation gardens. She's noticed that we spend more time together, that we look at each other differently. Marcus nodded, though the thought of potentially disappointing Kira made his stomach clench. The little girl had become precious to him, and the idea that his relationship with her mother might somehow damage their bond was terrifying. How do you think she'll react? I'm not certain, Zara admitted. She adores you, but she's also protective of our family unit. The loss of her father made her wary of changes that might take people away from her. They decided to approach it together during one of their regular weekend excursions to the Geological Survey Station, where Kira could add to her mineral collection. As they walked across the red Martian landscape beyond the dome, Kira ranging ahead to examine interesting rock formations, Zara and Marcus found their moment. Kira, Zara called, come sit with us for a moment. We have something to discuss. Kira approached with the cautious expression of a child who recognized the tone of important adult conversation. She settled between them on a convenient boulder, her markings dim with uncertainty. Am I in trouble? No, little star, Zara said, using the Athani endearment that never failed to make Kira smile. But Marcus and I wanted to talk to you about our family. Kira looked between them, her young face serious. Are you going to make Marcus go away? The question hit Marcus like a physical blow. Kira, no one is going anywhere. Then are you going to leave Mama and me to be with Jessica again? Marcus knelt in front of her, meeting her eyes directly. Kira, I would never leave you and your Mama. You're my family now. The most important family I've ever had. Then what? Kira's markings brightened slightly, hope replacing fear. Zara took her daughter's small hands in hers. Marcus and I have realized that we care for each other in a special way. The way partners care for each other. We wanted to ask how you would feel if Marcus became more than just our friend. Kira was quiet for a long moment, processing this information with the gravity she brought to all important decisions. Would he live with us? She asked finally. Eventually, if that's what we all decide we want, Zara said carefully. Would he be like my papa was? This question was directed at Marcus, and he felt the weight of responsibility in her violet eyes, so like her mother's, but still holding the uncomplicated trust of childhood. I would never try to replace your papa, Marcus said gently. He was your father, and he loved you very much. But I could be another kind of family to you, someone who cares about you and wants to help take care of you and your mama. Kira nodded slowly, then surprised them both by launching herself into Marcus's arms. "I want you to stay forever," she said fiercely. "I want us all to be together forever." Marcus held her close, meeting Zara's eyes over their daughter's head. The fierce joy in Zara's expression matched the overwhelming relief in his own chest. "Forever sounds perfect to me," he said. The colony's reaction to their relationship was mixed, but generally positive. Dr. Kim expressed delight that two of her favorite staff members had found happiness together. Petra Nakamura declared that she'd seen it coming months ago and offered to help plan their eventual move-in arrangements. Even Chief Engineer Roberts seemed pleased that his consulting engineer was settling into colony life more permanently. There were some raised eyebrows, some whispered conversations about the appropriateness of interspecies relationships. But these were vastly outnumbered by expressions of support and genuine happiness for their small family. The one person whose reaction mattered most, however, remained to be faced. Marcus encountered Jessica in the Sector 5 cafeteria on a Thursday afternoon, 3 weeks after he and Zara had made their relationship official. She was sitting alone, reading research notes while picking at a salad, and she looked up when he approached with his lunch tray. "Marcus?" Her greeting was neutral, neither warm nor cold. "Jessica, mind if I sit?" She gestured to the empty chair across from her. "I hear congratulations are in order. You and the Athani liaison." Marcus settled into his seat, studying his ex-wife's expression. She looked well healthier than she had during the final months of their marriage, more relaxed. Her relationship with Carlos seemed to agree with her. "Her name is Zara," he said mildly. "Right, Zara." Jessica set down her stylus and gave him her full attention. "Are you happy?" The directness of the question surprised him. "Yes, very happy." "Good." She paused, seeming to choose her words carefully. "I owe you an apology, Marcus. Several apologies, actually." "Jess, no, let me say this. I handled our divorce badly. I should have talked to you about how I was feeling instead of just finding someone else. And I should have recognized sooner that we wanted different things from a relationship." Marcus nodded, appreciating the acknowledgement even though the pain of their breakup had largely faded. "I also want you to know," Jessica continued, "that watching you with your new family, it's made me realize something important. You weren't wrong to offer care and support the way you did. That's who you are, and it's a good thing. I just wasn't the right person to receive it." "Thank you," Marcus said quietly. "That means a lot." "Carlos and I are getting married," Jessica announced. "Next month. Small ceremony, just a few friends." "Congratulations, I'm genuinely happy for you." Jessica smiled, and for the first time since their divorce, it reached her eyes when she looked at him. "You know what? I believe you are." As Marcus walked back to the xenobiology lab after lunch, he reflected on how strange and wonderful it was that his failed marriage had led him to exactly where he needed to be. If Jessica hadn't left him, he never would have been living in Bachelor Pod 47 that night when Zara and Kira needed help. He never would have discovered what it felt like to love someone who truly wanted his care, or to be part of a family that felt like home rather than a project to be maintained. Sometimes, he realized, the best solutions came from the most unexpected system failures. That evening, as he helped Kira with her homework while Zara prepared dinner in their now shared kitchen, Marcus felt the deep satisfaction of being exactly where he belonged. The mechanical routine that had sustained him after his divorce seemed like a different lifetime, a placeholder existence he'd endured until real life could begin. "Marcus," Kira said, looking up from her math homework, "when you and Mama get married, will I get to help plan the wedding?" Zara dropped her stirring spoon, and Marcus felt his heart skip several beats. "Who said anything about marriage?" Zara asked, though her markings were brightening with what Marcus was learning to recognize as pleased embarrassment. "Emma's parents got married after they lived together for 6 months, Kira explained with 8-year-old logic, "and her little brother got to carry the rings. I could carry rings too, or flowers, or both." Marcus caught Zara's eye across the kitchen seeing his own mixture of amusement and deeper emotion reflected in her expression. "Well," he said carefully, "if your mama and I ever decide to get married, you would definitely be part of the planning." "When?" Kira corrected firmly. "When you get married. Because you love each other, and we're a family, and that's what families do." Out of the mouths of babes, Marcus thought, watching Zara's smile grow radiant as she returned to her cooking. Sometimes the most complex problems had the simplest solutions, and sometimes the best families were the ones you built from love and choice, rather than obligation and genetics. As the Martian sunset painted their windows in shades of copper and gold, Marcus felt a contentment he'd never thought possible. He was home, not just in a place, but in the hearts of people who loved him exactly as he was. It was, he reflected, the best engineering project he'd ever been part of. Act 5, Family. Chapter 9, Building Tomorrow. 1 year later, Marcus stood in the doorway of their new shared living unit in Sector 2, watching Zara and Kira arrange furniture in what would soon be their permanent home. The family housing allocation had come through 2 months ago, a spacious 3-bedroom unit with actual windows overlooking the colony's central gardens, and enough room for all of Kira's collections, Zara's research materials, and Marcus's growing library of technical manuals. More importantly, it had room for them to be a family without the careful choreography that had characterized their previous living arrangements. "The couch goes there," Kira declared with the authority of someone who had spent considerable time planning the optimal furniture arrangement, "so we can all sit together and watch the earth rise on Tuesday evenings." Marcus smiled, hefting the recycled polymer couch into position. Kira's attention to family rituals never ceased to amaze him. Somehow, at 9 years old, she had become the keeper of their traditions, weekly geological expeditions, Sunday morning breakfast competitions, where each of them tried to create the most interesting meal from colony rations, evening chess tournaments that had evolved to include Ethani strategy games that Zara had taught them. "Perfect," Zara said, stepping back to admire their work. Her markings were bright with satisfaction. The particular pattern Marcus had learned meant contentment with a project well completed. "Now, this place feels like home." Marcus wrapped his arms around her from behind, marveling at how natural the gesture felt after months of gradually increasing intimacy. They had moved slowly, deliberately, building trust and understanding the way engineers built critical systems, with attention to every connection point and stress factor. "Any regrets about giving up your independent housing?" he asked, pressing a gentle kiss to the side of her neck, where her markings spiraled in delicate silver patterns. "Only that we waited so long," Zara replied, leaning back against his chest. "Kira, what do you think? Ready to christen the new place with our first family dinner?" Kira bounced on her toes, her own markings pulsing with excitement. "Can we make the mushroom pasta with the real earth cheese we've been saving?" "I think that calls for a celebration dinner," Marcus agreed. "After all, it's not every day a family gets a real home." As they worked together in the spacious kitchen, Zara handling the protein synthesis, Marcus managing the grain preparation, and Kira carefully grating the precious imported cheese, Marcus reflected on how dramatically his life had changed. The mechanical routine that had sustained him after his divorce seemed like something from another person's life entirely. His work had evolved too. The multi-species integration project had been so successful that the colony administration had created a permanent department dedicated to adaptive engineering. Marcus found himself leading a team of engineers and cultural liaisons, designing systems that could accommodate not just humans and Ethani, but the growing number of other species that were beginning to see New Olympia as a model for inclusive space colonization. "Dr. Kim called today," Zara mentioned as she seasoned their meal. "The Xenobiology Department has received approval for the Extended Cultural Exchange Program. 6 months on Athos Prime, working with their bioadaptation specialists." Marcus looked up from the grain cooker. This was the first he'd heard of any extended travel plans. That sounds like an incredible opportunity. When would it start? Next spring. It would be a chance for me to reconnect with my home culture while bringing human scientific perspectives to their research. Zara's voice was carefully neutral, but Marcus caught the undercurrent of longing. And it would be an opportunity for Kira to finally see Ethos Prime, to understand that part of her heritage. That's wonderful, Marcus said, and meant it, even as his heart clenched at the thought of being separated from them for 6 months. How long since you've been home? 8 years, since before Jorath died. Zara's markings dimmed slightly. I always told myself I would take Kira there someday, but there was always another work contract, another reason to postpone the journey. Kira looked up from her cheese grating with obvious excitement. Mama, could we really go to Ethos? Could I see the singing crystals you told me about, and the floating gardens? Possibly, little star, but it would mean leaving Marcus behind for half a year. The kitchen fell quiet, except for the gentle bubbling of their dinner preparations. Marcus could see the conflict in both their faces, excitement about the opportunity warring with reluctance to be separated from their new family unit. Actually, Marcus said slowly, an idea forming, who says I'd have to stay behind? Zara turned to stare at him. Marcus, it's a xenobiology research expedition, cultural exchange. You're an engineer. An adaptive systems engineer who specializes in multi-species integration, Marcus corrected. I bet Ethos Prime has infrastructure challenges that could benefit from human engineering perspectives. Atmospheric processing, waste management, energy distribution systems adapted for off-world colonies. Kira's cheese grating stopped entirely as she looked between her parents with growing hope. You would consider leaving Mars? Zara asked. Your career, your colleagues, everything you've built here? Marcus considered the question seriously. 2 years ago, the thought of leaving his carefully constructed routine would have been terrifying. Now, looking at his wife and daughter, because that's what they were, in every way that mattered, the choice seemed obvious. My career is adaptive engineering for multi-species communities. Where better to develop those skills than by working directly with alien infrastructure? He reached for Zara's hands, noting how her markings were beginning to brighten with possibility. And my family is you and Kira. Everything else is just geography. There would be challenges, Zara warned, though her voice held excitement now. Ethos Prime is very different from Mars or any human colony. The atmospheric composition, the gravity, the social structures. Good thing I have an excellent cultural liaison, Marcus replied with a grin. Kira dropped her cheese grater entirely and launched herself at both of them, wrapping her arms around their waists in an enthusiastic group hug. We could all go together, she said, her markings blazing with joy. A real adventure, as a real family. That evening, after Kira had finally been convinced to go to bed, despite her excitement about potential interstellar travel, Marcus and Zara sat together on their new couch, watching the Earth rise through their window and planning their future. Are you certain about this? Zara asked, curled against his side with her head on his shoulder. It's not just a vacation. 6 months minimum, possibly longer if the research goes well. You'd be giving up your position here, your colleagues, the life you've built. Marcus thought about it, really thought about it. Not just the romantic gesture, but the practical implications. Leaving Mars, his career trajectory, the colleagues who had become friends, starting over in an alien environment where he would be the cultural outsider, dependent on Zara's knowledge and expertise in ways that might challenge his independence. 2 years ago, I thought my life was over when Jessica left, he said finally. I had this narrow idea of what success looked like, what home meant, what family should be. Then, you and Kira crashed into my carefully ordered existence and taught me that the best parts of life are the ones you don't plan for. Zara's markings pulsed gently against his chest, a rhythm he'd learned to associate with deep contentment. Besides, Marcus continued, I'm an engineer. I solve problems by figuring out how different systems can work together. What's one more system to learn?
Ethani society is complex, Zara warned. We have different concepts of privacy, different approaches to family structure, different relationships with technology. You might find it overwhelming.
I might, Marcus agreed, but I'll have the best possible guide. And I can't think of anything more overwhelming than losing you and Kira because I was too scared to adapt. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the familiar red landscape beyond the dome and imagining silver-blue worlds with singing crystals and floating gardens. There's something else, Zara said eventually. If we do this, if we really commit to making a life together that spans multiple worlds, multiple cultures, I think we should make it official. Marcus's heart skipped. Official how? Zara sat up to look at him directly, her expression serious but warm. Marcus Thompson, will you marry me? The proposal was so unexpected, so perfectly Zara practical and romantic and slightly unconventional that Marcus found himself laughing with pure joy. Yes, he said, pulling her close. Yes, absolutely yes. Though I should warn you that Kira is going to be insufferable about being right regarding the wedding planning. She earned it, Zara replied, then kissed him with the sweet intensity of someone sealing a promise. Chapter 10. Red Sand, New Hearts. The wedding took place 6 weeks later, in the observation deck overlooking the Martian landscape, where Marcus had first imagined what a different life might look like. The ceremony itself was a blend of human and Ethani traditions, exchanged vows in both languages, rings made from Martian minerals and Ethani memory crystals, and a blessing that honored both Earth and Ethos Prime as the planets that had shaped their families. Kira served as both ring-bearer and flower girl, her formal responsibilities taken so seriously that she practiced her processional walk for weeks beforehand. She wore a dress that incorporated traditional Ethani ceremonial patterns alongside human formal wear, a visible symbol of the cultural bridge their family represented. The guest list was small but meaningful. Dr. Kim and several colleagues from the xenobiology department, Petra and other neighbors who had watched their relationship develop. Even Chief Engineer Roberts, who pronounced it the best systems integration project he'd ever witnessed. Jessica attended with Carlos, offering genuine congratulations and a wedding gift that included a note wishing them all the happiness they deserved. But the moment that would stay with Marcus forever came during the exchange of vows, when he looked into Zara's violet eyes and spoke the words they had written together. Zara Eth Silvan, you taught me that love isn't about trying to fix someone or changing yourself to fit their expectations. It's about finding someone whose life works better with yours in it, and whose happiness becomes part of your own definition of home. You and Kira have given me a family I never knew I needed, and a future I never imagined possible. Zara's response, delivered in her musical voice with markings bright enough to illuminate the evening shadows, brought tears to half the guests. Marcus Thompson, you showed me that kindness without expectation is the rarest gift in the universe. You opened your home to strangers, your heart to love you thought you'd lost, and your life to possibilities you were brave enough to embrace. With you, I am not just surviving in alien spaces, I am thriving and building something beautiful. The reception was held in the colony's central gardens, with music that blended human classical pieces with Ethani harmonic traditions. Marcus danced with his new wife under the dome's simulated stars, while Kira spun between the other guests, explaining to anyone who would listen that she had known her parents would get married eventually because they looked at each other like people do in the happy stories. 3 months later, they stood together on the observation deck of the transport ship Horizon's Dream, watching Mars shrink to a red dot behind them, while the stars ahead had promised new worlds and new adventures. Marcus held Kira on his shoulders so she could see better, while Zara pressed close to his side, her markings bright with excitement and anticipation. "Second thoughts?" Zara asked, noting his contemplative expression. Marcus considered the question seriously. Behind them lay Mars and the life he'd carefully rebuilt after his divorce, the job he'd mastered, the colleagues he'd come to respect, the routine that had sustained him through his darkest period. Ahead lay Ethos Prime and complete uncertainty alien environments, professional challenges he couldn't predict, cultural integration that would test every assumption he'd ever made about family and society and home. "None," he said firmly. "Just thinking about how strange life is. 2 years ago, I thought losing Jessica was the worst thing that could happen to me. Now I can see it was the best thing. It led me to you, to Kira, to this." "The transport captain says we'll reach Ethos Prime in 18 days, Kira announced from her perch on his shoulders, "and that their moons have rings like Saturn. Can we go see them, Papa Marcus?" Papa Marcus. The title still sent warmth through his chest every time she used it. They'd discussed it months ago, how she would always carry her birth father's memory, but how Marcus had earned his own place in her family structure. The Athani had multiple words for different types of parental relationships, and Kira had chosen the one that meant chosen father who protects and guides. "We'll see what's possible," Marcus promised. "But first we need to learn how to live on a planet with 2 suns and floating continents." "And singing crystals," Kira added enthusiastically. "And singing crystals," Marcus agreed, catching Zara's amused expression. As the ship's engines hummed around them and the stars grew brighter in the viewing port, Marcus reflected on the journey that had brought them here. From a failing marriage and mechanical routine, through a chance encounter in a transport hub, to family dinners and shared laughter and the daily miracle of being loved exactly as he was. He thought about the email he'd received from Dr. Kim just before departure, telling him about the young human engineer who'd been inspired by their story to apply for a cultural exchange program with the Centaurian mining cooperatives, about Petra's note mentioning that Bachelor Pod 47 was being converted into transitional housing for new interspecies couples, with a small plaque by the door reading, "Thompson-Sylvan Family, First Residence." Their story, it seemed, was becoming part of New Olympia's history. A reminder that sometimes the best solutions came from the most unexpected encounters, and that families could be built from kindness and choice rather than just genetics and tradition. "Look," Zara said softly, pointing toward the front viewing port where a new star configuration was becoming visible. "The Centauri system. We're almost in Athani space." Marcus squeezed her hand, feeling Kira's excited bounce on his shoulders as she spotted the unfamiliar constellations. "Ready for the next adventure?" he asked. "With you two?" Zara's markings pulsed with the pattern he'd learned meant absolute contentment. "I'm ready for anything." As their ship carried them toward silver worlds and singing crystals, toward challenges they couldn't imagine, and joys they had yet to discover, Marcus understood that he had found something more valuable than successful systems or predictable routines. He had found home in the hearts of people who loved him, not despite his tendency to care too much, but because of it. Not as a project to be fixed, but as a partner to be cherished. Under alien stars, carrying his daughter toward her mother's homeworld, Marcus Thompson smiled and prepared to discover what new kind of family they could build together among the singing crystals of Ethos Prime. Sometimes, he realized, the best engineering projects were the ones that had no blueprints at all, only love and hope, and the courage to keep building something beautiful from whatever materials life provided. Epilogue. 5 years later, in a letter from Ethos Prime to Dr. Kim on Mars. "Sarah, I hope this message finds you well and that the xenobiology department continues to thrive. Zara asked me to tell you that her latest paper on adaptive biosystems has been accepted by the Centaurian Science Council,
and that she credits much of her research success to the foundation she built at New Olympia. As for our family, we're doing wonderfully. Kira is now 14 by Earth years and has become something of a local celebrity here for her work, bridging human and Athani geological research methods. She's decided she wants to be an interplanetary systems engineer like Papa Marcus when she grows up, which both terrifies and delights me. The infrastructure project I've been leading has resulted in the first successful human-Athani hybrid habitat, and we've had inquiries from 3 other systems about adapting our designs for their multi-species colonies. It turns out that learning to make a tiny Mars bachelor pod work for 3 very different people was excellent training for large-scale adaptive engineering. We've been asked to extend our stay for another 2 years to oversee the expansion project, and honestly, we're considering making Ethos Prime our permanent home. Kira loves the lower gravity and the singing crystal formations. Zara has reconnected with her extended family while building a career that spans multiple worlds. And I've discovered that being a cultural outsider isn't nearly as daunting when you're with people who make everywhere feel like home. We miss Mars, and we miss you. But we've learned that home isn't a place. It's the people you choose to build a life with, and the love that makes any environment worth adapting to. Give our regards to everyone at New Olympia, and thank you for believing that an ordinary engineer and an extraordinary alien liaison might have something special to offer each other. With love and gratitude from the red sands to the silver worlds, Marcus, Zara, and Kira Thompson-Sylvan. P.S. Kira insists I tell you that the singing crystals really do sing, and that she's teaching them human lullabies. Some things, apparently, are universal.